for this. Cheers. Excited? Nervous? How you feeling?
Good.
Ready? Ready to roll? Okay. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Anna if you're new here, and this is my husband Zach. And I don't think I've done a whole lot of videos with him in the past, so this should be interesting and fun, and I hope you guys will stick around as we answer all of your marriage questions. Alright guys, I'm Anna, this is Zach. We have been married for coming up 15 years. It'll be 15 years in August. We've been together like 21 years or more. We dated for 6 years before we got married. We met when I was in 9th grade and he was in 11th grade. We'll just tell you guys our quick little love story. I had this private school cotillion thing that I had to do, and I had to have a date for that. And I had a crush on him forever, and it took me we went on some kind of trip with our church, and it took me the whole bus drive home, which was probably like 6 hours or so, to get up the courage to ask him. And I didn't ask him till we were pulling up in the driveway because I knew that was my last chance. And I asked him and he was like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, I waited all this time for nothing. That was our first date, was that little cotillion thing. And then he asked me to his prom. And so then it just kind of went on. He sent me an email saying, I wanted you to pray about you and I. And then I think you had to talk to my dad after that too, because we didn't really date in our family. And we had grown up together. We had gone to church together forever. I think I came to that church when I was like 12. And your parents had already been going to that church. But our parents were always really close friends. My dad and Zach's dad did ministry together. And so they're still really good friends to this day. We all vacation together, his parents, my parents. It's a really sweet situation. Mm-hmm. But my parents knew really early on that Zach was the one that God had for me. And I knew the first time I saw him that that was the man that I was going to marry. Even though the long 6 years of dating and our off and on relationship during that time had me doubting at times, I still knew that he was the one. Do you want to say anything else about our story?
Not really. Pretty much covered it.
So we broke up for a year. He joined the military during that year. And then we dated a little bit during his military career. And then we had broken up again during one of those years that you were in the military because the long distance was really, really hard. And then I think we were actually broken up when you came and proposed because I finally had it. I was like, listen, done with this. You keep telling me you're going to propose. You never propose. So if you don't get your act together, I'm not doing this. And you got your act together. And you came and proposed. And it was very sweet. And so we've been happily married for 15 years. It's definitely had its ups and its downs. We've had really hard years. We've had really good years. We've had years where we had no money, years where we had more money. And it's just been beautiful. 4 kids later, and we're still very much in love. I feel like we have a really strong marriage. It's not perfect at all, but I feel like we communicate well. And we have just a really good, strong relationship. So we wanted to share a little bit of our marriage advice with you guys today and answer some of the questions that you guys left over on YouTube. I asked on YouTube and also asked on Instagram. So you guys sent us some awesome questions. Thank you to those of you who did submit questions. So we're going to take a stab at trying to answer some of those today. So the first one was, how do you manage to get time for you as a couple? How do you keep your relationship a priority? We had a bunch of questions like this one. And so my first thing I would say is make sure you're talking to each other daily. The statistics on how little couples actually talk are shocking. I think it's like 5 minutes a day.
4 or 5 minutes a day.
And that's not okay. That's why there's so many divorces. So you definitely need to be talking to your spouse every single day, not through text. You need to sit down, look at each other eye to eye, and have real meaningful conversations. And, not just spilling the beans about your horrible day, talking about other things as well, and really connecting about what each other is interested in and what you talk about your hobbies and your personal life, not just about like, especially once you have kids, it can be really tempting to only talk about the things that the kids did and the disciplinary actions that need to happen and all of that. But sometimes it's really good to just remember that you are still individuals with personalities and likes and dislikes and hobbies, and so it's good to talk about those things too.
On top of the daily face-to-face conversations, if you can get away for a date night once a month, that's a really good goal to shoot for. If it doesn't happen, till every 6 weeks or every other month, that still needs to happen. Get away regularly. Sometimes we'll do a in-home date, get a nicer dinner and just, have it delivered or go get it and bring it back. Put the kids to bed early or let them watch a movie somewhere else in the house.
We've also done it where it's just a dessert that I made, or we'll go get like Chick-fil-A cookies or something simple. When you're short on cash, sometimes you have to just be a little bit creative with things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be, a $100 dinner and another $40 or $50 on a movie or some other entertainment. You can date very frugally, or if you have some extra, it's good to splurge a little bit, maybe quarterly or semi-annually if you can. And if you can go on a trip together, every quarter or semi-annually, even if it's one night or just 2 nights, a weekend or something like that, just a quick getaway is really, really helpful to keeping the marriage strong.
It's important to invest in your marriage. So we actually budget for this every month because we don't live near family. So sometimes we do have other friends that will offer to keep our kids. But for the most part, we usually hire a babysitter. So that is pricey. So we budget for that every month. We have an envelope. We put cash in it every single month. And that is our childcare envelope and our date envelope. And we invest in our marriage financially every single month too. And there's been seasons that we couldn't do that. And it was really like scraping the bottom of the barrel to try to do that. And so that's when you just have to get creative. But if you can, really try to invest in your marriage every single month, if not every single week. We've also been taking walks together. That's been really good for us to connect. Since the beginning of the year, we've made it a goal to walk a mile a day, about 6 days a week. Sometimes we'll do 7, but that has been awesome for our marriage. We just have that time to talk to one another. Sometimes the kids go with us, sometimes they don't, but even if they go with us, they're usually riding their bikes. So they're not talking to us a ton, and we can still spend a good bit of that time talking to one another, and that's been really special and really sweet. And it's like 20 minutes that we have together to connect and be out in nature, and so that's been really great for us. And also just be intentional about how you connect throughout the day. So if your husband goes to work, you can like send him sweet text. Y'all can write notes to one another. Just think of little things you can do throughout the day to let your spouse know that you're thinking of them, that they're a priority for you. I try to ask him, how can I pray for you this week? Just different things like that. And be sure that you're praying for your spouse every single day. That is so, so important. The next question is, what are some marriage-related book recommendations that we have? Our favorite one is probably The 5 Love Languages. We went on a long road trip a couple of years ago, and we listened to that on audiobook together during that trip, and it was so good. And if you haven't heard of that book, it basically has 5 different love languages that each person has. And so your love language is either going to be like words of affirmations or gifts or physical touch. There's several others, but we learned what each other's gift was. And so the way you give love may not be necessarily the way that your spouse likes to receive love. So you have to think about that. And so I try to think consciously about that every single day. Have I poured into his love cup every day is kind of what I try to ask myself. And it's just a great book. So we highly recommend reading that book. Obviously, the Bible is a great resource also to be reading. There's so much about marriage that you can glean from the Bible. So be sure that you're in the Word. The next question is, how do you handle big decisions when you disagree? You had a good point about this that you wanted to say.
I mean, if you're facing a big decision, moving or buying a house or buying a car or something.
Or even just any big purchase.
Yeah, I mean, any big purchase, and it doesn't necessarily have to be financial, whether the kids should go to this school or that school, or should we homeschool, or
should we use this curriculum or that curriculum?
If there's not unity between, you and your spouse, you probably need to stop and talk it out, figure out what their perspective is, where they're coming from, what do they think we should do or shouldn't do. And if there's not unity, just stop until there is unity. Don't make big decisions by yourself and then tell your spouse after the fact. Or if there's disagreement, going ahead and doing it, anyway, is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and if you feel really strongly that your decision is the right one and your spouse is not on the same page, then that's when I would say, really pray about it and pray that the Lord would change their heart, or say, Lord, if I'm in the wrong, please just change my heart. And you will be amazed at just by praying about it how the Lord oftentimes will just work it out for you. But the biggest thing is just make sure you're communicating, because a lot of times with big disagreements in marriage, I find that it's usually all comes back to a lack of communication. He didn't know how you felt, you didn't know how he felt. And so if you just can communicate in love with calm composure how you're feeling, sometimes that just really makes all the difference, and it can really make or break a decision just by making sure that you're communicating exactly how you feel. Because you may feel one way about something and your spouse just thinks, oh, she just feels this way because blah, blah, blah. But you actually have a really personal reason why you feel that way. And if you would just share it with that person, then maybe he would really understand how you're feeling. What are some of our favorite marriage resources? So we both love podcasts, and we obviously have read some books, and we've already mentioned some of those, and we love the Bible. But I think probably podcasts are our biggest marriage encouragement. So a couple of our favorite podcasts are The Fierce Marriage, Courageous Parenting, Marriage After God, Now That We're a Family, and the Stronger Marriage Podcast. And the Stronger Marriage Podcast, they actually do marriage retreats at different churches, and we were able to go to one a couple of years ago, and it was actually free. And so it was really awesome. That was so good for our marriage. So I highly recommend looking into that, because marriage conferences can be really expensive, but this one was actually very affordable, because the only thing we had to pay for was our night stay. And so look into that, because marriage conferences and things like that can be so good for your marriage. And if nothing else, it's great to just get away, but also when you go and you're getting away, plus you're investing into your marriage and doing a little bit of homework for your marriage, it's really good too. Submission. What's your stance? Oh, this is the hot topic one, isn't it? Okay, so first, before we talk about this, we wanted to read Ephesians 5:22. And I guess we'll go all the way to 26. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that he might be holy and without blemish. So we went through 27 there. But I think you can't read 22 through 24 without reading 25 and so on, because it's very much important. And I think that a lot of people read 22 through 24 and then they close the Bible. And it's very important. So the first part talks about submitting to your husband. And so wives should do that, because the husband is the head of the home. But it also says, husbands, you need to be loving your wife. So he should be cherishing us and loving us, but we should be submitting to his headship and his leadership.
Yeah, I mean, that really sums it up. It's not just this men lording over the women. It's a two-way street, and it's, yes, there is submission, but husbands are also, we must submit ourselves to the Lord and lead our wives and our families in a biblical way. So there's no lording or domineering over your wife. She should be cherished. And I mean, keep on reading. There's really good verses past 27 there, where it continues just to talk about how much, Christ cherishes the church. And in such a way, husbands should cherish their wives and really just hold them up and love them and lead them from a loving standpoint.
Okay, this one says, hello from England. Thank you for watching. I really enjoy and am spiritually fed by your channel. I married my agnostic husband in 1992. I became a Christian in 1994. However, my husband remains agnostic. Naturally, I follow the biblical guidance to submit to and remain cheerful and silent on the subject. We only discuss it when he asks a question, etc. I was wondering if you and your dear husband can share any wisdom on the subject or offer advice and tips.
This is a difficult situation because, like we were talking about in Ephesians, obviously it should be between a marriage with two believers. The wife should be submitting and loving to the husband, and the husband should be loving, honoring, cherishing the wife as Christ does so for the church. So in a marriage where you've found the Lord and are a believer, but your husband is not, you might confine yourself in a little bit of a weird situation as far as the context of Ephesians 5 goes. So the biggest thing is just to live out an example to the best of your ability. And you're going to make mistakes, but just show him the love of Christ day in and day out, on the easy days and on the hard days, and then just to continue to lift him up in prayer. Get in a good local church and just make your marriage and his relationship with the Lord a number one prayer priority for that local church. Just to continue, like everybody in that church, they should know your husband by his first name. He does obviously, he probably doesn't go to church with you, but because you're lifting him up in prayer and praying for his salvation and the revelation of God's word to him, that everybody surround you, your friends, everybody should know your husband's name, and he should just be a constant prayer on your lips day in and day out.
That's really good. Yeah, that would be my biggest advice, is just to pray for him and watch God change his heart. We've seen that throughout our whole life, how God has done that. So many awesome redemption stories where the wife was saved and the husband wasn't, or the husband was saved and the wife wasn't, and they just prayed and loved on them, and the Lord eventually brought them to Christ. And it doesn't always happen, unfortunately, but a lot of the times it does, and it's really exciting. So don't give up.
Absolutely, don't give up. It doesn't always happen quickly. And if you've been on this journey since 1994, you know that. It's been a very long time that you've been in this situation. So just continue. Pray without ceasing is what the Bible says. You probably feel like your prayers have been unanswered for so many years, but they're not. The things will happen, when they're supposed to happen in God's time. And just don't lose heart. Keep the faith, stay in the Word, stay plugged in with a local body of believers for that encouragement when it gets hard and you feel like nothing's happening.
And another idea I had, I don't know if your husband is like, maybe he doesn't want to go to church, but I wonder if he would go to a marriage conference with you that is a Christian marriage conference, because that's one way he could hear the gospel and be encouraged in the faith and meet other believers. And you could say it's just for our marriage, but obviously when he goes, he's going to be learning about the Lord too, and that could be really beneficial. Okay, the next question says, how do you goal set and remain a team through challenges? So we're not big goal setting people. I do it a lot, but as a couple, we're not like sitting down, writing out goals and like checking them off necessarily. We do set goals at the beginning of the year. We usually set a few goals, like we want to take this vacation this year. We want to, like we did the 1 mile a day. We want to do that every day this year. Just different things like that. But we definitely have goals as far as like our family, what we want our kids to learn in school, how we want them to be raised, kind of what we want them to become as far as their character and things when they get older. We have financial goals. So we do have some things like that. We just try to communicate about them a lot. That really helps, because if you make goals and then just leave them sitting on the sideline, you forget about them and then they're not priority. So we do try to kind of revisit those a lot, especially like when it comes to homeschool and finances.
As far as remaining a team, through challenging times, you just have to make it a priority that whatever the situation is, you're going to stay together. You're going to let it draw you together and not push you apart. And that's very, very difficult sometimes, but you just have to be 100% committed 100% of the time. Even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it, that the tough, challenging situations that we know we're all going to face, that you're going to walk hand in hand, one step at a time, even if the steps are slow, hard, agonizing. That's just the bottom line. There's no way through it except together.
Yeah, And it's important too to not talk about divorce. Like, we have never had a conversation about that. We've never used that word. Like, that's never even been an option for us at all. I feel like that is also pretty biblical. Unless there's biblical grounds for divorce, that should never be something that comes up in your conversation or as a threat or anything like that, because that's just incredibly damaging. And it also is just a tool that the enemy tries to use to split couples up. So that's how we feel about that. What's your best parenting advice for a 5-year-old? How do you discipline your children? Okay, we're not going to go way into this because there's already so many great resources out there. But the first thing I'll say is make sure you're in unity on that, because if you're both not on the same page, then discipline, you can just forget discipline altogether, because discipline does not work with any child in any family unless both parents are committed and you're consistent with it. That is the biggest advice I'll say about parenting and discipline, is you have to be consistent. Whatever you decide to do, you have to be fully committed to it as a couple and be consistent with it. I will point you guys to an awesome podcast by Elizabeth Elliott that I absolutely love, and it's the way we discipline, and it's the heart of it that we come from. And so I'm going to link that in the description box for you guys to take a look at. But it is such a good podcast. Also, a book I'll recommend is the Dare to Discipline book by Dr. James Dobson. It's an awesome book. He has a bunch of different parenting books, but that one is great about discipline, and it comes from a biblical standpoint. And that's where we got our ideas for discipline. We both do what our parents did because it worked out great for us. But they got their wisdom from the Bible on it, and the Bible has lots of light to shed on parenting if you will just give it a chance. But we definitely go by the biblical way of doing it. The best advice for a couple who are about to be first-time parents. Congratulations. Advice for mom, dad, and relationship as a couple. I think our biggest tip we tell every new parent. What is it?
Sleep train as soon as you can. 3 months, 4 months. I know they're still little, but they can sleep train. They will be okay. Wrap them in their
swaddle.
Wrap them in their swaddle. Put them on their back. Put them in their room, separate from you. Some mom, for the first mom, you may not be ready to do that. Right at 3 or 4 months, but you will sleep better. The baby will sleep better.
It's for their own good. It's for the whole family's good.
Over the course of 2 or 3 nights, sometimes a few more, your whole life will change, because those first 3 months are going to be very difficult with this constant interrupted sleep and that sort of thing. So sleep train that baby.
It's the best thing you will ever do for your marriage and for your sanity and for your child too, because we've done that with every single one of our kids. The oldest one, we waited till he was about 4 months old, which was probably a mistake. Or he might have even been 6 months old. I think he was actually
5 or 6 maybe.
Yeah, I think he was 4 months old. And honestly, it was too long because those were some really hard 4 months, especially because he had colic. But we did it a lot earlier with all the other ones, and it made a huge difference. And of course, you still go through seasons where they want to get up at night and maybe they're sick and you have to kind of redo it. But it is still the best thing we've ever done in our parenting journey, is get all of our kids in sleep trained early on, sleeping in their room. None of our kids sleep in our room. None of our kids get up during the night. I mean, obviously if they're sick or they threw up or something, they do. But other than that, it gives us so much relaxation at night, because we know once the kids are down, we can relax, we can hang out, we can do what we want to do, because the kids are well taken care of and they're asleep and they are getting the rest that their little bodies need. The next thing is, don't stress about every little thing. It's so hard to do when you first have a child, but they're so resilient, and you really don't have to stress every single little thing. And it's really hard to do, I know, but just try not to. And then get advice from seasoned parents that you trust. Don't Google everything. Go to someone you trust. Maybe they have kids that are already out of the house, and you have seen the fruit of their labor, and you want to know how they discipline, or you want to know how they sleep train. Ask them about it. Ask your parents. Get advice from people you love and you trust. And don't rely on doctors and Google, because they don't always tell you what's right. And then ask for help when you need it, especially those first few months. They're so hard. You can't do it all on your own. It really does take a village. So just reach out and ask for help.
As far as your marriage, first 3 months, I harp on that sometimes, but you have to be a team. The mom can't do every feeding. Even if you're breastfeeding, you got to think of some ways to where you help each other. Both of you have to get some sleep. Neither one of you are going to get the normal amount of sleep that you're used to or that you may want. But husbands, don't let your wife get up 3 times in the middle of the night and then be up again at 6 or 7 or 8 a.m. to start the day. This question was for first-time parents, so you don't have other kids, you know, in your scenario, but a lot of people do. If you're having that second or third or fourth child, all the other kids their schedules are going to continue as normal. So tag team, you know, through the night diapers and feedings, and then divide and conquer with the rest of the kids, you know, if you can. Okay, you're going to get up with the baby and the other kids and start breakfast while the other one sleeps in till 7 or 8 or 9 or however long. If they were up all night, let that mama sleep as long as she needs to sleep. There shouldn't be this very one-sided approach to parenting. Obviously, with breastfeeding, there's, you know, things that dad can't do, but you can do pretty much everything else, whether it's the household stuff, cleaning, cooking. Do everything you can to help your wife. And be unselfish with your time, with everything, especially those first 3 months. And sometimes that feeling of, that newborn infancy stage, is it ever going to end? I say 3 months because if you can start sleep training, that really does change your entire world. So the sooner you do that,
they can really be sleeping through the night by 3 to 4 months.
Absolutely,
they really can. And we're going to get asked, how did we sleep train? We cried it out. We cried it out. I think I've got a whole Instagram video. If you scroll way through my Instagram videos, you'll see I have a whole video on just how we did that. But it worked. It worked with all of them. It's really hard on your mama heart, but it's short-lived. It's it's quick, and it's short-lived, and it's the best thing for them. And we highly recommend that. All right, guys, I think that is all of your questions. Thank you guys so much for submitting those. And I hope that you enjoyed this video and that it was encouraging to you guys. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Also, Zach has his own channel if you want to go over there and check it out. He does it mainly during fantasy football season. He talks about fantasy football, family, faith, and he does it with my son, Gabe. And their YouTube channel is called Fantasy Family, and I will leave the link to that below so you guys can check that out. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Get away.
No.
Bye, guys.